Dean, would you like to come too? Vivian, I don't know if you've actually started the meeting before, but you've presented at meetings before. So you can maybe tell your friends what happens is. Perfect. You want to lead everyone? You want to be the leader and go first? Okay. Nice job. Sophia and Dean, would you like a turn with the gavel? If you're really good at it, I'll let you stay in case we need to use it later. Well done. Very nice. Thank you. I would like to call to order the November 16th regular meeting for the Chagrin Falls Board of Education. Ashley, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bros.
Here.
Mrs. Bendel.
Here.
Mrs. Garvey.
Here.
Mrs. Miller.
Here.
Dr. Schlepper.
Here.
If you would all please join me to stand and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point, I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Schlepper to introduce our student showcase for the evening.
Fantastic. Good evening, everyone. We're going to have a presentation by some of our students that are multilingual this evening. So the teacher and me wanted to do a little plug about what it means to speak multiple languages. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jones, the principal of Gurney. So the beauty of multilingual, it improves your memory. It enhances your ability to multitask, and it improves your performance in other academic areas. So learning a new language pushes our brains to get familiar with new grammar and vocabulary rules. Multilingual students have the ability to switch between languages, think in, think in different languages, and communicate in multiple ways. It also helps interdisciplinary performance. Fully immersing yourself in language learning means not only learning the basics of these language, but learning how to communicate with your peers and understanding activities in a far deeper way. So that's just the tip of the iceberg on how incredibly important language learning can be. So we're really excited to hear from our students, but I will turn it over to Dr. Jones and she will kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you for being here at Gurney and for having us tonight. We're excited to showcase a great project-based learning activity. Years ago, we switched our second and third grade on-course schedule to having Spanish, STEM, and art for one trimester a year only, but having those classes meet every other day for an hour. The sole purpose of that was for teachers to be able to engage our students more in project-based learning activities. It's hard to invest in a project when you see the students once every 6 to 8 days. You spend half of that time reviewing, so you get less time to actually engage in the project. It would take forever to finish it, and it's typically not engaging that way. So the trimester class schedule has really enhanced our instruction in these classes. This project-based instructional strategy lends itself to involving students in more complex problems and projects that have an authentic impact on them or the school. You're about to hear of just such a project from Mr. Engelhardt, our kindergarten through third grade Spanish teacher, and 3 third graders who have just completed their trimester of Spanish for the year. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Engelhardt.
Good evening and hola. I am Christopher Engelhardt, the Spanish teacher here at Gurney. And students and I are excited to share with you the project that we've been working on to make Gurney not only more welcoming, but also accessible for students who are new and speak another language. We are calling it, as of now, the Gurney Multilingual Project. And with me tonight are 3 experts to share the steps that we've taken to solve a potential problem that students who speak another language coming to Gurney for the first time might face. This project came about from us using our Spanish vocabulary to talk about our likes, our interests, and then comparing it with each other across the class in quizzes that we created for each other to take. And through those comparisons, it got us into a discussion about how we can be respectful of these differences, these similarities, and through that skill of empathy, which is part of our state social emotional learning standards. And with that discussion of empathy, we got to see how we already use that skill for situations at school, on the playground, in our own classrooms, and then at home as well. So we were able to take that skill and then translate it into a scenario for people other than ourselves and a problem that they might face. And with that, that takes us to the first step of our project, and I'll pass this off to our first expert.
Hola, I am Sophia Jacobson. To begin our project, we talked about the different ways we might feel if we were in a new country and school with a different language. As a class, we shared that we might feel excited, scared, nervous, lonely, and frustrated. Then we thought about how someone might feel the same way if moving to the United States and coming to Gurney. We planned to interview Mrs. Schneider, our teacher of English, to speakers of other languages. Before she visited our class, we created questions so that we could learn about her students and how they felt coming to Gurney and speaking another language. Mrs. Schneider told us that most students feel the ways that we imagined and can be frustrated when they are not able to communicate with someone. We also learned that Russian and Spanish are two common languages that her students speak. Having learned this, we came up with 2 solutions to start helping these students feel more comfortable and welcome at Gurney.
And to describe the first solution we took is our second expert.
Hola, I am Dico Steas, and I will share with you our first step in the project. We wanted to help students find important places in Gurney and be able to recognize some of their own language. We walked around the school and made observations about these important places, such as the office, the restrooms, and the playground. We decided that labeling these places with 3 languages, English, Russian, and Spanish, would be a good start to making Gurney more welcoming. We also decided that these labels should look similar so that students can recognize them. We thought about how speed limit signs look the same in each state to help us. Each student in our class took one location and translated the English word to Spanish and Russian. We also chose to include a way for students new to Gurney in the language to be able to hear the English words for these places. We used an online voice tool to record each of our voices and made them into QR codes for students to scan and hear. Here are a few on the screen, and we have a few for you to try out as well.
Oh.
So if you'd like to take a look at that, if you have something to scan them with, you hear a quick audio clip from our students in the class. Each location.
Yes.
You do?
Thanks.
Yes. Do I speak now?
Ashley, are you ready? You want to do yours first?
That's a lot of pressure.
I'll let you know.
Let me see.
Yes. Hi.
When I have my volume off because it's a board meeting.
All right, there's that.
Garden.
Hit it again.
Do it one more time.
Do I hit it again? Because it just said garden.
Yep, just the word in English.
Oh, okay.
Garden.
Could you hear it?
Just hit play and go.
I know we're all terrified to hold our phones up to the.
I know.
And I'm like,
Wait,
okay, let's go. It's silent.
Because it's a board meeting.
Yeah,
There you go.
there we go. Did we catch that?
Yes.
Lori, do you have one?
I do. I'm going next because my phone has a tendency to die.
Lost and found.
No, it's not.
Library.
Aw.
That's me.
Ready?
Boys restroom. Yes.
I do.
Office.
That's
And
fantastic.
Final solution that we've come up with in our project will be our final presenter.
Hola, I am Vivian Self. For this final part, we thought about how students are frustrated when they are not able to express themselves and communicate. We know our labels are a big help and wanted to continue to create a resource for new students who know another language to have helpful sentences and phrases. We organized into groups and chose one of 7 important themes or locations, which include the playground, the office, the classroom, and being with friends. We used an online tool to create a book of phrases for each location and theme. Each of us took a page and created 3 phrases for different skills and topics. We added pictures and will add our voices to the phrases in order to best help these students. Here is our library of books and a closer look at one we have finished for the playground. Each page has a topic. Here is a page for games and equipment. This is the kickball field. This is the playground. Here's a page about asking to play. You can join us. This last page is to ask for help. I need a Band-Aid. Now to talk about what is next for our project.
All right, it's me again. So for looking into the future with all the work, the great work that we've done so far, we talked about how we can enhance what we've started. And this lends itself to our trimester setup where students who haven't, as Spanish just said, and those who are starting will be able to continue with some of the ideas that we have up here and some of our own as well. Some of the things that we've decided on and are looking forward to in the future are dedicated devices for these students to be able to scan the QR codes, adding more pages and locations and books to our library, adding more languages as well to our labels. And we've also looked at creating personalized welcome folders for the classes that these students will enter from their teachers, from their classmates as they come to Gurney for the first time. And also a way for the families of these students to connect with our school, with their own resources that will be helpful for them in the future. And with that, that concludes our work on this project. Thank you very much for listening. If there's any questions, we're super happy to share.
Are there any other languages that you guys are looking forward to adding in the future?
Yeah, one, yeah.
What languages can you think of that you'd like to add someday?
French.
Yeah.
Ukrainian.
Japanese.
What was your favorite part about working on the project?
Recording our voices and making the books.
For me, I liked adding in the pictures because it was kind of like a mini adventure through pictures and you could scroll down and see pictures. That was fun.
I also liked adding the pictures.
I liked that you took time to think about how someone new to our district might feel. And now you're prepared when you see someone on the playground who looks new, maybe doesn't have a friend yet, you know that they might not know how to speak or ask for what they want. It's great to have ambassadors around our school building, especially 3rd graders, who can lead the way in helping our students feel more welcome.
We have.
I think we all
Oh.
know one.
All Spanish, right?
I think we all know one.
Made it very personal.
That's great. Yes, fantastic.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. So we are going to continue on with our meeting tonight. We have some exciting facilities things to talk about, and we have a 5-year forecast that is really mesmerizing. But I'm going to give a chance for our families to take a break and leave if they want to get home and get dinner and homework and bedtime going. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
sorry.
That's great.
So- Mm. Catherine, do you want me to move 6.03 and 04 or just 03?
6.03. Oh, I'll just move for it.
I know, but which one? Just so I know.
Uh,
Doing both? Or- okay.
Yeah, it's the, right, it's the outdoor space.
Lisa. So there's the
Oh,
outdoor
yeah.
spaces 03 and then the
Did I
art wing
miss this?
moves.
Yeah, I'll
to
just
04.
I was locked in my office today finishing
So the Switzer? Okay.
Because they're not like, they're not like these we do year over year.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it just was a little late.
Yeah, that's not.
But it's on it.
fine, because Jennifer has it more of a, if it's something we discussed in the meeting already, then I'm happy to move it for tonight. All right, let's see, moving along, I move to approve the minutes from the October 19th meeting. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Anybody have any comments, changes? Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Rose,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yeah.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
Okay, at this point, we will give updates on our district advisory committees. The first committee that we will hear an update for is the strategic planning committee, which Lauren will share an update about.
So the strategic coordination team met last week. The first thing we did was go around and each person came up with one word that sort of encompassed how they felt about the district. And then we sort of reflected on that collection of words and how we felt about that. We then talked further about Ted, is it Ted Rose or Ted Ross? Ted Rose. Todd Rose, his book, and there's also an accompanying TED talk called The End of Average. And that would be something you guys might want to check out for yourselves. It's really interesting. It talks about the premise is for in cockpits, actually, they were having not great results with their pilots, and they figured out it's because the cockpit was designed for the average person, but when they broke it down, there actually wasn't a single pilot that met the average criteria for every single physical dimension. So instead of designing it for everyone the way they thought they were designing it for no one because it actually fit no one. So they talked about how just being more flexible in different dimensions really serves people better. And I know when we're talking about kind of abstract concepts like this, I like to hear how it applies to education. So one example that he talked about would be if there's a student, for example, who is struggling with reading comprehension, but is really brilliant at science, their strength might not come through because the science books are written at an average reading level. So it talked about how you could, for instance, use technology to like read the science textbooks aloud so that it even the playing field, so their talents in science could read through despite having some struggles in other areas. So that's just kind of an example of that. So we talked about that. We talked about some of the things Jennifer has learned from Yang Zhao. Did I say that right? We reflected on various quotes of his, and I wanted to read one of them because I took one to put in my notebook here. It says, never judge whether or not a talent is valuable. Rudolph's red nose, his talent, was not deemed useful until one foggy Christmas Eve. There will be a rise of uselessness in multiple futures, and all people's talents will find a space to be useful. So we reflected on concepts like that. And I think that's it.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, policy committee, Lori.
Policy?
Yeah.
Okay, so we went over a lot of this in the last meeting. I'm just going to share it a little bit. We've got some policies for first reading tonight. We pulled a few of them out because we had a question about some of the legal standards as far as what was legally required versus what was best practices. So those will be added back in for the next reading. We have compared, we've picked 3 or 4 districts to compare to as a baseline We're comparing initially to OSBA, and we'll have hopefully another 40 or so for you to look at in a month. So we're going to try to keep moving along at that clip. We've made it mostly through the board policy and the student policies, and we're going to be moving into treasurer policies and administrative guidelines for the next one.
Questions? Curriculum?
We had a curriculum meeting a couple weeks ago. We talked, we heard from Katie Gill about the dyslexia training and dyslexia standards. There's a lot of work going on, particularly at Gurney, with a big cohort of teachers and those new requirements, and they are rigorous, and our teachers are rising to the challenge. It sounds like they're making a lot of progress and really getting a lot out of the training. We also, I see Jared here, there was also the AP Collaborative 2.0, which is a collection of teachers across different districts who are experts in the area, trying to capture each other's skills and learn from each other. The teachers did that on a PD day. We went through selection criteria for some of our differentiated programming at the intermediate school, and spent a lot of time walking through those pathways and talking about what some of the best ways to accommodate all of our different learners, particularly in math, might be to move going forward. And let's see if there's anything else. Oh, and we're rolling out a new advanced options night for starting, I believe it'll be 8th grade, right? 8th grade with guidance and talking to parents about college pathways, high school pathways, Excel Tech, different options for students in high school, trying to push that information down to parents at a younger age, so parents have the opportunity to plan, and then that will be incorporated into course selection and communicate course selection options out earlier and more consistently to parents. So it's a big project in our guidance department, and they're making, it looks like it's going to be a great opportunity for parents. So we're excited to see how that night goes, and it's coming up on January 26th. Yeah.
Thank you. Finance Committee, are you updating or is Lori updating?
Do you want to do finance or?
No, I just did two. You can do fine.
Okay. The Finance Committee met last week and reviewed the 5-year forecast with our treasurer. Had a great discussion and understanding of where some of the assumptions came from and the trends that we should be aware of. And the committee is in support of the recommendation today.
Intercouncil met today, and our support organizations are busy as usual, doing lots of wonderful things for our district. Some highlights. Boosters has the turkey trot coming up. Their advice is to wobble before you gobble. That is at 9 o'clock on Thanksgiving morning, and the website is open for registration. The Ed Foundation just wrapped up their Boo Baskets student fundraiser, which was successful, and they're currently in the midst of their Charleston Wrap fundraiser. There are links on their page on the website if you would like to buy some wrapping paper. Walk to School, the Safe Routes is in recovery mode. Still excited about the success of the most recent event, and then they'll take a little break and then begin planning for Bike to School in the spring. The PTO is in the middle of their Unfund fundraiser, which they'll use to fund grants, professional development, and student enrichment. Gurney, they also provided dinners last night for the conferences for the Gurney and the intermediate school. Spark is working on identifying building reps for each of the buildings so that they can facilitate better communication back and forth. Community education has kicked off the ski club, which is a tremendous amount of work in this district. And the winter brochure should be out before Thanksgiving. And the only other thing I would say is it's become apparent to me that there's a spirit of collaboration that is really growing among this group. They're starting to have a lot of sidebar conversations around how to do things better, how to collaborate and synchronize their efforts so that they're not redundant, and recognizing that they share the same resources and they're working towards the same goal. I think they've also done a great job connecting with, I think there's more clarity right now of each of the administrators in our district and our role, and they have more familiarity with those people. And so I know that they've reached out to talk about doing some videos, for instance, with Mike Doherty. And so seeing that and then participating today in several different district committee advisory meetings. It's also, it takes time for culture shifts to happen. And we saw a culture shift last spring with our intercouncil in recognizing value they could lend besides fundraising, just to help us support all moving in the same direction and with messaging. And I'm seeing much more now a collaborative spirit of not just fixing one thing that someone is saying like, oh, we could do this better, but really taking a big step back and asking, what is the possibility? Like in an ideal world, what do we want this to look like? And pausing and thinking through then, okay, so how do we go about that? And I have a poster in my laundry room that says, sometimes success is having one more patch than you have holes in your inner tube. Those of you who know we know well will know that that's very appropriate. But I'm seeing us move away from this like one more patch on the inner tube thing to maybe the inner tube isn't serving us right anymore. Maybe we want a different approach to staying afloat or moving ahead. And that is really so positive and rewarding. It's great to see the leadership of our district, our superintendent, our treasurer, our administrative team really making that kind of impact. And so I just want to pass along my recognition and thanks to all of you and hope that you will also pass that along to your team. And that is my intercouncil update. With that, I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Penzarski for the superintendent's report.
And tonight we have a few guests. I'm going to actually turn it over to Mr. Wolfter and let him introduce Ryan from TDA to talk about our transportation design.
Okay, thank you. Our transportation design, I'll just kind of start back. Most of you know this, but I'll swing back to the intermediate schools coming online. It's brand new. The school district is entering into facility master planning exercise to look at the rest of the buildings. We develop a comprehensive facility master plan that looks at the condition of all of the different buildings and assets the district has. One of the things that came out of that and was referred by the capital planning committee was the transportation facility. Not only is it aging and the cost of repairs kind of outstretched the replacement cost, but also it's undersized and not functioning very well for what we need it to. So over the last couple of years, the board's been very aware of the fact that we've been investigating solutions for that. As of this past spring, we entered into a contract to formally provide design for that. So TDA has been working hard, even the last 6 months to really dig into the design. The design's getting close to the place where we're finalizing it and then looking to bid that. So Ryan's really talking today through where we are in the contract and where we are in the design process, and would like to kind of share some of those design pieces and then also take some questions as well too from that. Anything else? Okay. All right. With that in mind, Mr. Ryan Schmidt from TDA and the End Design.
Evening, everybody. I've given this presentation a few times. So
you know what, I can. Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure. So if at any point during this presentation, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and let me know. But really where we are right now, this whole thing, it started a long time ago where we talked about some upfront work that would need to be done to explore any options with doing a new facility or renovations to a facility or any sort of work on the Gurney campus as far as maintenance and transportation goes. So a lot of that process has happened over time. So we've done surveys, we've done geotechnical investigation, we've done all those sorts of things. And we went through the process of touring other facilities, really getting into the nuts and bolts of what you need. I am getting a lot of feedback. What you need for these facilities to operate in a very functional, long-term, low maintenance, highly effective manner. So really what we've done is in meeting with some of the smaller groups in the district, planning committees and such, we've arrived at some kind of baseline elements that you need. You need the 2 bays for the bus garage, for example. You need a masonry structure that will withstand time and abuse and things like that just come with a building having to live 50 years into the future. So we've built all of that into this project. What you're seeing here is a few interior elevations of some of the portions of the building. What these really are is, this is our model. So we built essentially the building in a computer program, and we're going through all the detailing at this point. So the site work is going on, we're designing the site, we're working on the building components, and we're finding some efficiencies, and we're finding some potential advantages to certain ways of doing things. So if you could go to the next slide. I'll talk through. The floor plan hasn't changed exponentially since the last time I presented, but essentially what we built into it is we still have this main floor space, which is the central serving element within the building. This has your development area, which is also an area for drivers and for staff to have lunch break and things of that nature. This was reviewed multiple times, and we had many discussions about what that space is. And this is really an environment where you have bus drivers and you have people on campus that have straight jobs, coming and going, you've got delay time in between. It's good to have a place for people to be, take a phone call, it's really good between their shifts and be able to have them in the building in that sense. So this room would also serve for safety meetings, training, stuff of that nature. So there is a place for all those events to happen. All of that up in this plan, you do have your offices. So we talked about an administrative core piece, one to serve kind of the maintenance component of things, and one to serve the transportation component of things. But having them in proximity, so they're shared resources. So essentially, you're not building two sets of orders, you're not building two sets of restrooms, you're not duplicating all of these things that are necessary to the basic, most efficient functioning. I'll start with transportation for maintenance portion of the building. This was to be a highly efficiently laid out space. This was over time, all the storage spaces everywhere in any district that I work with, they get eaten up by other programs. They get taken over for the specialist spaces. They get taken over for the stuff we need for other events and things of that nature. So over time, the maintenance department had lost their places to other things. This space is designed a little bit taller, and we designed a rack storage system, so you can store giant pallets of stuff within this space and get full use of all in the space. We've also built in an area in the back of the facility where you can have some standard type shelving, so they can have some of the smaller items that they need on a day-to-day basis, but also the potential to have an alternate built into this project, so we can get a small mezzanine in that area to basically duplicate this space. What this means, and what you'll see over in transportation as well, is storage, on-site storage, very important to all of these folks to do this type of work. Because anytime you have to run to the store to pick up a part or to pick up something and you're spending 15, 20 minutes going to a place and coming back, that's not only the time you spend, it's also the fact that you're on the road, not in the shop to make stuff that can be done in the facility. So this is not only about just having stuff in stock, it's about efficiencies and things like that. With both of these, the main offices, transportation and maintenance primary offices, there would be views into those spaces. So that monitoring, making sure things are being done the way they're supposed to be done, and having that kind of oversight and the ability to have control of those spaces and really kind of grasp what's going on. It's very important to keep these spaces functional and safe. The transportation portion, since day one, we've been talking about this two-day solution, and what you presently have, the current garage is essentially this big. And that includes the storage cap. It's a very, very compact type space. In touring other facilities around the area that we went to a couple, Kenston was probably the one that I gleaned the most information on. Really kind of the spacing and things with the buses, the ability to move equipment down between, the ability to get your part, tools and pieces, parts, and all those sorts of things where they need to be, again, be safe and efficient was critical. A little bit of square footage needed around these spaces to make them efficient, really aided in the gentlemen and ladies that work on these buses and these vehicles in doing the job efficiently. There's nothing like being underneath the bus and having to crawl out, go along to the tool crib and get something that you don't have that you should. The other thing, the current facility basically has walls lined with equipment. And while that's most efficient use of the space you currently have, it is ideal to have such a tool here where you can work now how people. Because there's stuff that you're going to have to get out on the counter or operator or something of that nature. You're working on the keys. You don't want to have that sitting in the or be disrupted. The other thing is fluids. So you have all those in grease and washer fluids and things of that nature that presently you're sitting in canister for all the space. Ideally, all that is stored in an contained space so that you have this stuff not stuck. You don't want your drinks or the oil or anything like that to go on the floor. So it's not only been about just having space for it, but the safety and other features. So what you're seeing in all this now, which is probably not been seen in the past, is just the layers. So it's got things. So it is a matter of discussing with transportation, for example, the different canisters will need and different fluids that we might have on the reels. It's about talking about air compressor, making sure the size of what they're big. So it doesn't start out when you get tires and all the sorts of things that you need to grab equipment and tools that we use in this space. It's about providing exhaust rates, which you see down in these locations, so that you can attach them to the back of the vehicles and get the exhaust out of the space so you don't get in the safe work. It's all those pieces, parts that go into actually making the color. The other thing that I'll talk about briefly here before we get into the sections, I've talked about the structural system box numerous times. We go back and forth. We talked about a pre-engineered metal building, which is essentially it's super efficient steel structure, and there's metal panels essentially stuff, which is how we started looking at this. As we started going and the fact that we have an all masonry building around the outside, we started to look at redundant systems. Essentially, the pre-engineered metal building would be the structural system that's sitting inside of this big masonry structural system. So at some point, we decided the columns and all the side wall girts and all that stuff that you have to put into the pre-engineered metal is essentially duplicating what we already have in this structure. In talking with our engineers, came up with a very efficient roof structural system, which is essentially just some large joists that actually space out over the top of the vehicles so you get higher volume inside of this. So we went from something that was creating problems to something detailing around spaces and systems to the point where we found some efficiencies in structure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so essentially what you're doing is you're saving all the steel that you would be putting into these columns. The other thing that you do with the structural system, it essentially sits on its own sort of. So you have these big columns coming down, so these things are independent from the rest of the things. You're buying not only bigger footings for these columns, you're buying wall footings, so you're saving on the concrete for those footings. You're saving on all the wall footings, members, and then there's detailing inside of them. Pre-engineered metal moves at a different rate to very high efficiency design. And so when you do that with a masonry structure, you essentially have a moving element inside a smart shell box. And so all the detailing is complicated. It's got a lot of steel. So by going with this scenario, we have a very rigid, solid building. And it's basically because you're already buying a masonry already. So it was really that aha moment that we're doing the things we got at. So short answer is yeah. The outside of the building is very straightforward. We have a big masonry part that consider the outside as far as the masonry patterning or anything that we're getting to the point where we have all our detailing done. So we'll do back just kind of trying to banding that things of that nature. Kind of what we're contemplating can get brick masonry, bricks very expensive. You can do split base, CMU lock, which is kind of base concrete masonry. And then they also have a product that is concrete And so what that is essentially looks like a brick. It's made out of concrete, more cost effective. It has the properties of a concrete product. So it does, have that look a little bit of a skin union, but from a distance, we're still going to be sitting. I think that's kind of the direction we recommend. It's got the cost efficiencies of that product, but it's got a little bit more texture and color, which you see. Other than that, we talked about these doors, these large doors, keeping some glass elements into those spaces, again, providing natural light. Angle skylights throughout the spaces. The facilities we toured and just other ones I've seen in the past, facilities that have inside that environment, just it's much healthier feel and for minimal cost of putting this in. I think it really impacts workers and keeps it to be kind of a great space. That's really not windows. In fact, when we have the doors. The other thing that you see here is these are office windows and they're windows off break room, development room. And what that does, again, provide access. So when you're in this building, I think it's very important to have the ability to see what's going on outside the space as well. We're joking about it earlier, I had to go up there and take a look at the facility and get some more simple elevations. And Mike told me that it's accurate. I haven't told them, but I think that's important to have people that are able to watch the facility and make sure stuff's going on and it's what it should be. So that ability to observe, I think is very so. Doors and stuff like that. We are going through everything we're doing on this building is again built for function and durability. So, like for example, a handful of the doors we have. Products, things like that will break down and just solve this again is looking at the structure of the cell, and you can see how it's been simplified. This looks big and imposing. These are space steps. Then you have a small number running in between them. So again, it's sitting over the top of the bus. So you've got this added volume over top of the buses. So you essentially got about 4 systems up on the buses. Have lights, things like that. We're seeing mezzanine in some of the offices below. And these are the the maintenance area with that little mezzanine space in it as well. So they're able to capture some of that volume and utilize that for their issues. Structural systems, unlike now, which is an uninsulated box, we would have insulation in this whole building, we could have in this whole building, and we have all this stuff. I think some of the equipment that we're talking about, we will get some things like that, making sure that we have that built in. We could look at some of the other things like reels and stuff like that, which are really nice to have. And I don't think that we can cost item. Looking at those potential alternates. One way I like to work in all of the projects that do is to go in a handful of alternates just to recommend it. So as you're going through it, you can see the values of things, something you might have thought as very critical to a project. Once you see that dollars and cents signs, it might change your opinion of that. And on the flip side, it's whether something you thought was going to be out of your capacity to purchase as you know something that was effective. Yeah, so at this point, you're more going to do it's really down to getting the wall systems lined up. So you see all these things are a bunch more than the actual set, but it's looking at the head and door details, the wall details, window details, all those sorts of things. And we still have investigative things we wanted to just as a base society, making most issues. So we really love so our engineers are at that catching up potentially so again we're catching up structurally as we're optimizing information. Questions?
Does this space then mean that all maintenance is done on this campus? Or do we still use the building that's on the high school campus for maintenance?
Still use that. This is adding. 100 square feet. But this is really meant as a satellite of an office. Right now, at that current facility, there is no office space. So it's taking essentially for their starting. This was to provide a space to work in office and to provide something else. They do a lot of work in the current maintenance facility for anybody that hasn't been they paint some good, got all their woodworking equipment, all that kind of stuff is trying to create that space. So this is really more of a storage depot and an office.
So between the two, can we get rid of the cargo container that's sitting in the parking lot? Yes. Okay. I just don't think that's a good look for us.
Yeah, it's basically. Some of what we had.
Okay.
And
it's a seasonal switch out between mowers and then snow removal equipment. So companies sometimes both, but great season, a wonderful fall. So,
Okay.
Where are we at in our timeline?
start wrapping up documents. I found everybody.
Okay.
When would we probably have the documents done?
Nobody's known the price for 6 months and it's not.
So bidding will be 3 weeks or something around that, and then what's next?
We get bids back. People are happy with the results. And see,
Okay,
it really depends on.
okay.
I'm gonna, we'll put together the. Bid documents, we have the list, and that's the cost. So this-
Is the thinking that we would do a work session when we get the bids back in and kind of review everything before we bring it to a board meeting? Just a thought.
We haven't planned. We
Yeah.
have no plans yet.
Okay. I feel like you've been amazing and you've brought us along all the steps, but I would like to just have one more chance to see it comprehensively with the numbers before we, look at a contract.
And then what I'd say all that is, we're in a, way this was designed is such that it's still moving.
Yeah.
So conceivably, they're not as hamstrung as other. I think that was a very important piece.
Mhm.
Of this. We don't know when anything was actually happening. It was vital to make sure we have some. I think once that is written too, that's something we need to think as part of the transportation part also say, these are our alternates, which of these are most important to do as well. So that we have that conversation. I'd be more than happy to sit in.
Actually had an infrastructure kind of a question. We just recently returned from the OSBA conference and they have a trade show that's adjacent to the conference. And I talked to the reps from the Thomasville Bus Company and I was really curious. They have electric buses there and I was curious about cost and price and infrastructure, and thinking about 50 years ahead or 25 years ahead and where we don't know how things will evolve. But there was discussion about there's grants that can happen and part of these grant funded pieces are electric interfaces that are built in or these hubs that are built into these spaces. So certainly not anything in the immediate future, but in 15 or 20 years, if that becomes something that is competitively priced, would we have the opportunity to have space or could the space evolve to?
So that's, that is put in like conduit, it's you from the building to the edge. That way, if you ever said, we're going to bring online and pay for buses, Then you let me know. Put in all that. Put in a giant. Might be something which.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think has technology for us. We see a lot. We can try to say. A lot of stuff is coming out. It's just like they're magic. It's so expensive now. So I think it's something we can continue to think I think the amount that we need us. I mean, you can't start a watch. But you could probably possibly work popular. Yeah, and it's the way the facility was kind of laid out on the site. You know that there's a central access point, right? I should cross. But we had all the buses in the center locations. We had all the occupants. We ran a big primary economy through that space. We have that bus in the future. Exactly. And that's about not.
Anything else? No, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Chris. Ashley. We had talked about your the 5-year forecast being in the report. Do you want me to move the agenda so that it's up? It's not currently listed there on the agenda.
Well, treasurer's report is listed on the agenda, so I can cover it there.
Okay.
Without any.
All right, I'm turning the meeting over to our treasurer.
Is there a clicker? Moves forward. That makes no sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but this isn't, this wasn't reading.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to be talking about the 5-year forecast. This is a requirement. Am I too loud?
Well, no.
This is a requirement of ODE. We have to present it. We have to board approve it and file it at least twice a year. If we have changes to it that are significant, we can always file an additional copy at any time. And then ODE takes all of these. They're all in exactly the same format for all 600 and what are we at now? 7 public school districts in Ohio. And they post them out on their website. So once this gets approved and gets filed with ODE, it will be out there as well as filed in our office. So couple things that I like to point out before we start actually looking at numbers, and I didn't even change one thing on these bullets. These are the exact same bullets from last year, November and in May. 5-year forecast is an estimate. So it's only as good as the information that we have now. We have seen over the last few years, I mean, decades really, that school finance can change at any moment. But in the last couple of years, it has changed significantly with the swipe of a pen down in Columbus very quickly. So again, it represents what we know today and what we think might happen in the future. The 5-year forecast takes into account tons of assumptions. So there are things that I think may happen and things that are tied into all of these numbers and used to calculate these numbers that could change. And it's not just 1 or 2 things. There are hundreds of lines and hundreds of things that go into coming up with all of these numbers. Anybody is really interested in all of that, I am more than happy to sit down and show you all the interwoven spreadsheets because it's actually really interesting if you're into that kind of thing. We'll not do that tonight because I know not everybody agrees with me. And it's important to remember that this is only the 5-year forecast for the general fund. So we have several other funds, all of our grant funds, special revenue funds. This does not incorporate any of those. This is general fund only that we're talking here. So attached to the agenda is the actual report that's going to get filed with ODE. The very last page of that report is the forecast. It's just the numbers. The first 22 pages of that report, it is 23 pages long. The first 22 pages are detail on every single line. So I'm, again, not going to go through all of that. And I don't expect everybody to read every single line on the forecast. So this is the summary for those of you who just want the high level, what's going to happen or what do we expect to happen. Most important line there is that second from the bottom. That's the annual surplus or deficit. So surplus is we are receiving more money than we're spending. And a deficit obviously is we are spending more than we are receiving. So you can see starting in fiscal 24, which is next year. So right now we're in the 22-23 school year, which when I say fiscal 23, that's 22-23 if you're talking school year. So fiscal 24, we do expect to start deficit spending. That is the same expectation as this time last year. However, we are in a better position than we thought we were going to be this time last year. Part of that is I tend to be rather conservative in estimates just because we have to be. We would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So we're still expecting to start deficit spending next year, but not to the level that we were expecting last November. You can see once you start deficit spending, though, as expenditures continue to increase, as they do for all of us, and our revenue stays pretty flat, the deficit gets larger and larger every year. That means we're eating into our cash balance. So I'm going to start with revenue. This is a picture of total revenue. Goes from 2018 to 2027. You can see it's not like some big slope. It's not increasing significantly. It's pretty flat. These two pie charts here show the percentages of our revenue. So where are we getting our money? The one on the left is last fiscal year, so that's 2022. Those are actual numbers. That's the most recent completed year. And then the one on the right is what we're projecting out into the future. That's the furthest year out on the forecast. So it's fiscal 27. You can see they look pretty similar. We're not expecting things to shift significantly. But you can see our reliance on our property taxes there. That giant orange piece of the pie is our property taxes. So I'm going to go through pretty much every line on here quickly, I promise. Going down through, if you're looking at the actual forecast, the line there, the line 1.01, that's a code from ODE. It's actually on the forecast. So if you're trying to trace these or you're looking at the forecast wall and going through this, that's what that line 1.01 means. On the left-hand side, I'm showing you how significant this source of revenue is. So you can see this one, this is our largest source of revenue. So that those percentages there, again, I'm showing you the most recent and then the furthest estimate out, 22 and 27. So you can see this is our largest. Now I'm going to go through a couple lines and I'll go through this quicker that are not nearly as significant. This is our largest source of revenue. This is calculated by the effective tax rate times our valuation times our collection rate. So our effective rate is our adjusted millage. So we pass levies and we have a voted amount or a voted millage on that levy. House Bill 920 then reduces what that millage level is as our property values grow. And that's in an effort to, back in the 70s, when inflation was significant, property values would go up and school districts would get giant increases in their revenue. So they passed House Bill 920 to try to eliminate sort of an unvoted increase in taxes. So when we pass a levy, it's calculated at a dollar amount. They take that millage, the county takes that millage, calculates what that dollar amount is. as we go forward and our property values increase, they then adjust the millage down so that we're collecting the same dollar amount on every single levy. So for example, tax year 21, our full voted mills was 118.3, I believe, or 0.25. And our effective rate was, I wrote it down here, was 48.96 mils in the class 1. So that's our residential property value. So our voters had approved 118 mils. We're only collecting just under 49 mils. So just to kind of give you a background on what I mean when I'm saying effective rate, times the valuation, that's clear. Your actual valuation, your taxable portion of that is 35% of on the residential, it's 35% of your full valuation. And then times the collection rate. So just because we assess taxes doesn't mean we collect all of them. We have people who are delinquent. We will receive then additional revenue in a subsequent year if someone comes and pays taxes that were due a few years ago. So theoretically, our collection rate could be over 100% if last year we had a lot of delinquencies, this year we catch up. Typically, our collection rate runs pretty close to like 98%. So we're lucky here in Chagrin that our collection rate stays pretty consistent. And as you can see, we expect the revenue to be pretty consistent and pretty flat there on our property tax revenue.
Hey, Ashley, just
Yes.
for someone who is looking at these, maybe we're not hearing you explain, it might be good to put 0.35 times valuation.
Oh, I could.
Because they might look at that and think it's their full valuation.
Yeah, good point. I'll do that going forward. So moving on to the next line, you can see on the left-hand side there that this is not nearly as significant. So when you're looking at all of these bar graphs here, you're going to see, is this a bar graph or a column chart? Column chart. When you're looking at these, they all look very similar because just of the scale. However, you have to really pay attention to what's on the left-hand side of the screen there. This is a very small portion of our revenue. This is the public utility personal property tax. Again, it's property tax. It's collected from the county. This is collected at the full value. The House Bill 920 does not apply here. But again, it is the collection rate would apply, but our collection rate on these are very, very high, much higher than our residential or our class 2. Very close to 100.
We want to thank our taxpayers for
Yes,
paying their taxes.
absolutely.
Makes your life easier, right?
Yes. So moving on to unrestricted grants and aid. This is our state foundation funding. I could probably do an entire hour just on the ups and downs and the changes and everything that has happened in our state foundation funding. However, I'm not going to do that because if you look to the left there, it's a very small portion of what we actually get. It's fairly consistent. We don't expect it now to continue to go up. The new foundation formula, the fair funding formula is in place. It's, in my opinion, working. It is a much more fair way to determine what school districts in Ohio receive. However, we are still in that top tier as far as all of the things that go into there, like property value and income and all of those things. So we are still receiving very small amounts in comparison to other districts and in comparison to what we need. Line 1.04, almost non-existent there on the left. So this is our restricted grants and aid. So the reason there was a large increase in that 2022 is this includes things like the catastrophic cost aid. So that's when we have certain special education situations that require significant dollars, we can submit to the state for reimbursement for a portion of those dollars spent at the end of the year. We had some increases in some of those spending just due to student needs. So we got a much larger reimbursement on the catastrophic cost. In addition, the wellness funding from the state that started a couple years ago. Initially, they were having us put that in a separate state grant fund. Now it's just coming directly through the foundation funding. So the money that we receive for that is coming into the general fund, and it's in this line. So that's why you see that jump there. And you can see I'm a little pessimistic on them continuing to fund that at the level that they are right now. I think that's probably going to start going down. Line 1.05 is our property tax allocation. This is our homestead and rollback reimbursements. These come from the state. Again, you can see not a very significant source of our revenue. Extremely predictable, extremely flat. Line 1.06 is our other operating revenue. Again, this is kind of one of those lines that anything that's coded to anything that doesn't fit into all of those other lines, they kind of throw in here. So a couple examples: investment, income, tuition, fees, rental, donations, things like that. You do see an increase in 23 from last year. I have received more, we have received more interest revenue to this point than we did in all of last fiscal year. So interest revenue, obviously, due to interest rates going up, we're gonna receive much more interest revenue in this year. And then depending on what happens with the economy and such going forward, I don't expect that to drop off significantly. Okay, gonna move on to expenditures. Do you have any questions with revenue? I know I'm presenting to you with my back to you. Sorry. Okay, so moving on to expenditures. Again, this is total expenditures from 2018 through 23 to 27 is estimated, 18 to 22 is actual. So just kind of a general picture of the trend of what expenditures look like. You can see that decrease there from 20 to 21. That was when we made the commitment to cut $1 million out of our budget. We did so. So had we not done that, every bar going forward would be just a little bit above that 2000, and then that same trend would continue. Looking at the distribution of our expenditures, again, just as I did for revenue, I'm showing you the 22 actual and then the 27 projected. Again, we don't expect too much to change as far as where we're spending our money. The two largest pieces of pie there are our people. We're a school. That's what we do. We educate with our teachers and our staff and our custodians and bus drivers and all of the things that it takes to run the district. Most of it is our people. So you're going to see that in your wages and benefits. Largest expenditure, personnel services. This is wages. You can see on the left-hand side how significant it is to our revenue or to our expenditures. We have done a really good job of being as efficient as possible. Obviously, we do expect things to slightly increase as we go along, just as all expenditures tend to do. That's why you're seeing that increase there. The forecast currently includes, we have one union that's already negotiated for the next few years. We have one we're starting to work on. So all of those estimates from November are still in there. Updated for the other, or from last November, are still in there. Updated for the union that was negotiated, and some of those things changed. But that is all in there. We also take into consideration retirements. When people leave, when they retire, when they leave us, it tends to be the people who have the most experience. They're the higher paid staff members. And then we replace them typically with lower paid employees just because they're younger and, sometimes out of college, they don't have as much experience. So usually when we're replacing somebody who has retired, it's going to be at a lower cost. So that's all kind of taken into consideration here as well. Moving to employee benefits, this is our second largest expenditure. If you're comparing this to what we had in November, these expenditures are lower. So this is one of the biggest variances from last November to this November. We received our renewal from our insurance, and it's 2%. So that was really good news for us. I had estimated in the range of 6 to 8, which is still better than most of our industry. Our industry is like 10 to 12 increases each year. So I adjusted those, and then going forward, I adjusted some of those down. I didn't adjust them all to 2% because I think that's a little too risky for me. But I did adjust those down. So this expenditure line, if you're comparing it to this time last year, looks much better than it did at that time. And that's, just due to changes that we've made in our self-insurance, and we've had a couple good years. We've been lucky. Claims have been lower than expected, and our balance in that self-insurance fund is healthy, so we don't have to take as large of an increase. Moving to purchase services. I hate the way this one is titled because it makes it sound as if we're just purchasing services that we don't feel like doing ourselves. That's not the case. This includes a lot of things that are special education, things that we have to provide for our students. It includes things like insurance and utilities, travel expenditures, and then all of the things that come from the deductions from the state funding. Those are all kind of thrown into this line. They're all coded in such a way that they're going into this line. So this isn't just, I don't know, our teachers don't feel like teaching some specific subject or something. These are not services we're just purchasing because we don't feel like doing them. These are things that are very large percentage of these things are mandated, and they're expenditures that we have to make. Supplies and materials. This is probably a line that we can, we have a pretty good control over. This is the supplies for our classrooms, all of our textbooks and things like that, office supplies, all of that kind of stuff, custodial supplies. Unfortunately, we can tighten our belts and do everything that we do. We're very efficient, and our staff is really great at shopping around and finding, the best deals and buying in bulk when they can so that they're saving money. Unfortunately, it's a very small percentage of our budget. So doing all of those things doesn't affect it in such a way that would really make a huge difference in things. So I know a lot of people, there's a perception sometimes that, schools just need to tighten their belts. And, if we do that in supplies and materials, which we do, it's not going to, extend a levy out by 2 years just by doing that. I am expecting increases just due to inflation. Prices are going up. And that, just is what it is. One of the large expenditures in here is bus fuel. Those costs have gone up significantly. So that's all calculated in here. And again, going forward, obviously, I don't know what fuel costs are going to be in 2027. So these are all just me estimating. Line 3.05 is capital outlay. This is our equipment, furniture, vehicles, things like that. Again, very small portion of our expenditures, but we do what we can to control it as much as possible. We don't expect any significant increases there. We're not looking at any large equipment purchases out of the general fund at this point. Line 4.3, other objects, just like the revenue, they have everything else they kind of throw in here. So examples of things that are in here are our county auditor treasurer fees. So when they collect our taxes, they charge us for it. All the audit expenses, we're required to have a financial audit every year. All of those expenditures go in here, bank fees, memberships, things like that. We expect that to stay pretty flat. And then other financing uses. This one's kind of, it's a little bit hard to predict. The biggest expenditure out of here is our transfers, and that portion of it is predictable. The advance out portion of it, if you're actually looking at the forecast, I have not estimated advances out going forward, although I do expect there probably will be advances every year. The advances are at the end of the year, I'm not allowed to have negative fund balances beyond what we've requested from the feds. So in the federal grant funds, all of those are set up in a manner that we spend first, then they give us the money. They don't give us the money up front. So with each of those, at the end of the year, I will do a cash request from them for whatever amount that I can at that point. If those don't come in, and if I do the cash request, say on June 24th, and then in those last few days, we make some expenditures, I can't have a negative fund balance beyond what we've requested. So beyond any higher than the outstanding request. So what we do to keep us in compliance is make an advance out of the general fund. So we advance money out of the general fund to those grant funds, and then we just send it right back. So if you're ever looking at these, the advance in should always be the same amount that was the advance out in the prior year. But those are kind of unpredictable because I don't really know how quickly the state's going to turn those around and that type of thing. So when comparing the revenue versus the expenditures, I like to do this. I've kind of try to be consistent every year, showing you the same graph. So the solid line there, has already happened. That's actual. The dotted line is going forward. So revenue is increasing slightly, but nothing to get excited about. And then our expenditures increase. That's the way life is. So at some point, which we're expecting to be next fiscal year, not this fiscal year, but in 2024, our expenditures are going to outpace our revenues. So that point where our expenditures outpace our revenue is where we start deficit spending. So this is pretty much the exact same information, just presented in a different manner. I know different people like to see things in a different way, and one graph may speak to somebody that someone else it doesn't work for them. So this is pretty much the same information. That solid black line in the middle there is 0. So you can see those years where we have received more than we spent. Now we're starting going forward to dip into our cash balance. We're going to be spending more than we're receiving. That is expected in schools. That's the levy cycle. Because our revenue stays flat from House Bill 920, which I explained, that revenue stays flat. So we pass a levy, our revenue goes up, our expenditures might be here. As the expenditures go up, revenue stays flat, and then we get a bump up. So there's like that stair step effect on our revenue, and then the expenditures are just steady. So every few years we have to pass a levy to catch up to our expenditures. And so if I did this going back, 20 years, it's going to go like this. It's just the way school finance works in Ohio, not everywhere. Another picture of just the same information. The gray bar there is the revenue. Orange bar is the expenditures. You can see in 24 and beyond, expenditures start outpacing revenue. The green line there is a corresponding cash balance. So as the expenditure exceeds the revenue, we start eating into our cash and using our cash balance, and that cash balance starts to go down. And then that's when we start thinking about our next levy and when are we going to pass another, when are we going to ask voters for additional revenue? How much do we need? How, all of that type of thing. How long do we need the next levy cycle to be? Things like that. So in the next couple of years, we will start having, that conversation where obviously I'm always looking at it. At this point, we passed the last levy in the fall of 20. We promised 4 years. We're certainly going to meet that promise, and I believe exceed it. So I think we're doing pretty good. Any questions? I never know if I cover enough detail, too much detail.
Ashley, can you speak a little bit to what areas of the forecast you would feel the need to consider updating or make some more changes to or be more concerned about in the event that we started to see a recession coming our way?
You know, it could be a lot of these lines, honestly. It depends on how we react and what happens. You know, we have to update it in May anyway. And then we would update again in November. So if something happens, you know, crazy quickly, that's going to significantly make changes, then we would address it. I don't know that, you know, just a recession in general is going to make us come back to this forecast and make changes. We've estimated, you know, for increases, we've estimated for inflation. I tend to be conservative in all of these estimates. So, you know, unless something were to really kind of blow up, I don't know that it would result in us making a change due to that.
What are some of the, so, you know, we would be vulnerable potentially in terms of collections, right? People could have trouble paying their taxes. What are some of the areas of expenses that we might start seeing shift?
That would really be up to, you know, what the board decides to do, how we decide to react. If we get to a point where, you know, we have to cut significant dollars out of our expenditures. I mean, we had these conversations a couple of years ago when we decided to cut $1 million, that there's nowhere to really affect the forecast except, you know, wages and benefits. It's just the reality. You know, nobody ever wants to have those conversations, but if we got there, that's what we would be doing.
I just wanted to do a little levy recap and correct me if I get any of this wrong, but I think, and I'm doing this because you have done an amazing job of keeping costs down. And I think the insurance change has just had a huge impact. The board's decision to really tighten our belts in 2020 has had a really positive impact. And so we were in a cycle of about every 4 years needing to go to the community for about 8 mils, 7.9 or around that amount. And we had been in that cycle for quite a while until 2016, and we passed an 8.9 mil levy and bond issue combined. And that allowed us to renovate the intermediate school and also gave us operating revenue. And then we achieved a 4-year cycle with our 2020 levy, which as bond millage was falling off, it was really just essentially the same millage going back on and operating.
Right.
That was 3.85 mils. And I thought we said that would last 3 years, but maybe it was 4. I might be misremembering.
I'll have to go back. You know what? I think you might be right. I think we promised 3 and I kept saying, but I think it's going to be 4.
So that was,
so I think that's probably why I had 4 in my head.
In concert with the cost savings that we achieved. And then shortly after that, we made the change to self-insurance. But we were nervous about that. That was a low millage amount. We wanted to respect the fact that the economy was not great at that time and give our taxpayers kind of a break. And we really did achieve that. And not only has that lasted more than the 3, but to 4. But we're in a place now where we probably don't have to talk about a levy for at least 2 years with what we've done. So that is kudos to you. Honestly, kudos to this board. And that hopefully the community recognizes that, because one of the dangers of getting out of a consistent cycle is people kind of forget that, you know, we don't get any additional revenue as inflation goes or as property taxes go up. And so just as a reminder, we will have to come back, but hopefully we have earned the community's trust that it is only when absolutely necessary for us to continue to provide the excellent education that we provide to our kids.
Well said. Anything else? All right, thanks, Ashley.
Yep.
This is the point in our meeting for public participation. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak with the board? If so, I will read our guidelines. Seeing none, I will move along. I've actually received a request from one of the board members to move consent agenda item 6.03 and 6.04 into superintendent's recommendations. So I move that we change the agenda to reflect 6.03 and 6.04 our superintendent recommendations. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Wait.
I'm sorry. Where's your stenography
I
machine?
know.
Any discussion? on that? Okay,
Um,
you just have to take the roll.
I know.
Okay, sorry. Just trying to help.
I got all my notes here tonight.
I know, but I threw you off.
I know. No, I
Okay,
didn't.
you
I'm
did
all,
it.
I'm so on.
Can you
Okay.
get that slide down? I can't stand that slide.
I'm sorry. See, everybody
Anytime you
likes
go
different
below the
ones.
line, It makes me nervous,
We've,
even though I know.
Here, we'll put
we're moving
actually,
those to
Put
superintendent.
that one up there in case anybody wants to contact me.
Catherine requested we move those to superintendent recommendations just because they're facilities expenses. So we're going to have an offline conversation around the process that we've been using to determine consent agenda versus superintendent's recommendations is whether or not it's been in front of the board before. If it's been in front of the board before in a public meeting, then we typically have been putting it under superintendent's recommendations, but we can have a conversation around whether or not we want facilities to always be called out as superintendents. So anyway, for tonight, we will move it into superintendent's recommendations. So now I will make a motion to approve.
Wait,
No, we have to vote on.
we
it.
have to
sorry.
vote on amending
Yeah,
the agenda.
Okay, Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes,
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
thank you. So now I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items 6.01, 6.02, and the original 6.05.
I'll second.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
I move to approve superintendent's recommendations 7.01 through 7.12, in addition to the two items that were moved there, the TDA proposal for extended learning and the TDA proposal for the art wing roof renovation. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. The policies, this is our first reading of policies for 7.12, and they are currently being linked to the agenda. Originally, they were just listed on the agenda, but the links weren't attached. So if you refresh your page, you will see that the links are almost all entirely attached at this point. Our superintendent is still going through and checking her work. But other than that, Jennifer, would you like to speak to some of these?
Do you want to start with the TDA while Chris is here? If you have any questions about the art wing or the outdoor extended learning areas, those were all shared through the facilities committee reports and through board updates.
I don't have any questions. I think the plan of getting to a certain point where we're ready to get bids so that we have more specific information is helpful. And I also don't mind the timing being delayed for architectural reasons, because I think we'll have more insight on what we might be hearing from the inquiry group that's working on strategic resourcing and how that may impact our priorities for facilities as well moving forward. So it's good to have everything sort of coming together at the same time, I think.
And Chris is leading that team, so I'm confident in what they've done. So if we go back to the superintendent recommendations, the first one is just a reclassification. That's 7.02 because of education. 7.03 would be certified substitutes. 704 would be classified personnel contracts. You'll notice, I think there are also some coaches at the bottom of that one as well. Sorry to flip the page. 706 would be a retirement of a bus driver. And I will say that we would love to have some more bus driver applicants. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yes, please.
Would love some of those. 705, I missed. Those were classified personnel resignation. And actually we had a few more substitute applications recently, so we really appreciate that for some different positions. So that was exciting. 707 was the community ed, just the adding of a staff member for softball skills. 708 is we had one more high school teacher that was teaching a 6th period that we needed to approve. 709 is FMLA. 710 is extended time at the curriculum rate. Some of that you'll see is for the holiday show. So that's new this year, how they're running that at the Performing Arts Center. So that will be an evening performance and we need more coverage. 711 is, again, that would be the classified personnel. Some additional support is needed. And some additional hours there are listed for that. That brings us to 712, and I almost have everything linked. I'm just going back and checking work. So by the time we're finished with this meeting, if you go on the website, every policy will be linked where you can click and review.
Right, to be clear,
Although
the board has had access.
this entire
It's just now making the access public because it's first reading.
And I'll apologize to the board for the few that were pulled off. Those were my fault. I didn't have time to review them. So apologize.
They were not, there were others.
Oh, it wasn't just me?
No, not just you.
Okay.
So the
Some of
minutes
them
will
were me.
also have the links, right? So when we,
I
I
know.
guess we'll approve the minutes at the next meeting, but I just want to make sure that since we're adopting new policies, they're very reflective of our former policies, but there are new that the community would have an opportunity to read them and, weigh
They
in
can-
on anything.
it's
So
all-
we'll have the links. So thank
Right.
you for doing that.
I'm sorry, you're asking if they can.
No, she's not. She just wants to make sure that they're public.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And the process will look, this is our first time putting these in for first reading. So those little things, like we pulled a couple because of the legal status, we wanted to double check, and there were some different things we wanted to do that will become more standard, but you will be seeing a big chunk of these at every meeting for the next 3 months, 4 months.
Did you get your question answered?
well, I'd like to talk about policies more, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to jump right to
Well,
that.
I just, to Catherine's question, Ashley, with regards to public access, this meeting agenda stays public, so they will be able to, okay,
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they're all on there.
okay.
Yeah, if anybody needs help finding them, just. Oh, it's gone. I was gonna say my
Great.
email address is
And
right there, but
No,
just contact me. I
me.
can
I'll
help.
take care of it, or Christy, and we can get you whatever you need. It's
Okay.
not a problem.
Any conversation, comments?
Do you
Catherine?
want to jump right to that one? Because I had a couple of things.
Sure.
Okay. Is that, if there's anything else before the policies? people
Real
want-
quick, before we move off of the bus drivers. Starting wage at level 0 is 23.87 an hour. So
Which is
we are looking for bus
which
drivers.
is-
Just thought I would
which
throw
is
that up there.
competitive.
Yes,
Right?
and it looks, and that's really great that we've got some new drivers and we need more, right?
more.
So anybody else?
All right.
Okay. Okay, on I think it's, sorry, I printed off something and I can't tell. I think it's 142.3.
Mhm.
I just made a note that we can attach publications that we want to attach that would be relevant for new board member orientation. And I would recommend we include sunshine laws as an attachment. So we can make that change for the second reading, but there was a placeholder for us to add additional
Yes.
material for new
Sunshine
board
laws.
members to review. And so we maybe want to revisit that before we finalize this and go through like what we would normally make available to a new board member. I think our handbook is different now, but we do have some shared agreements for the board that we developed. That type of document could be listed, but definitely sunshine laws is really, really helpful.
I made a very
Maybe some
similar note.
parliamentary procedure, shortcut list, things like that, am I understanding that policy the same way you guys are, that it's specifying like what information we would provide to a new board member to help them to get up to speed?
Well, it's specifying what we're required to provide them to get up to speed. So we can always go beyond what is required.
Okay.
We are putting what we were obligated to provide with them. And then in administrative guidelines in different places, we can spell out giving them more. So it's the minimum requirement in that instance.
Okay,
And then Neola adopts Rogers Rules of Order as our policy, which is a slight change. I mean, that we're using it, but this is actually a very, it's actually linked in, and it also includes, which I really like, a list of definitions at the beginning. So those definitions are going to get pulled through the whole document.
Yeah, I made a similar note because I think this is a good time to revisit that, having myself, just come on the board and have some perspective on what it would have been good to know right away.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, but it doesn't necessarily need to be
Yeah.
in policy. So it's just a question of what we want to do, what we're required to do and provide, and then what we want to do as best practices and should document, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in our policy document.
What was the number, just so I can look at the guideline?
2.3.
0142.3. Okay, thank you.
Do you want to say anything?
No, that was pretty much it. I-
Okay.
And if they're just like tiny little things like underscores and periods and stuff like
Then
that,
we'll-
so I'll like
Yeah,
batch
copy
them
us
and
on
send
and
them
we'll
to you,
make
and
the-
that
yeah.
doesn't affect the
Yeah.
first reading, second reading.
Right, any little edits will.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I apologize, I not as on my game because of the OSBA conference. And so I would have normally gotten a lot of these notes to you ahead of time,
Yeah,
but
no problem.
the student fundraising, which was 5830. I want to take a little more time looking at that because we spent a lot of time in policy developing a crowdfunding policy. And I didn't really get sufficient time to compare those
So we can
two.
pull that out.
Also, it references the new crowdfunding policy that Neola has, which we haven't seen yet because it's further down in the alphabet. So I wondered if we could just suspend that until we get the crowdfunding
Yeah, we can
policy.
Move it to the discussion.
Yeah.
What's the number for the second? one?
5830.
And what's the number for the new crowdfunding? Or is that not on tonight?
It's not.
That's
on.
just student
Okay.
fundraising.
Okay.
And then I have a comment, but there were just a couple of typos to check on the table that's on the agenda. 152 is actually officers. And 153, which is not shown, is appointees, but I believe we're reviewing both of those tonight as a first reading.
52. 152 is officers, 153 is not on tonight.
Okay,
It's just because it's on my list that was left off.
okay, so 153 is actually appointees. And then just 163 had a typo. It's not residing officer, it's presiding officer.
Right. You mean on the
On the-
On the table, right, right, just the title.
Right, not in the document. Okay.
Right. These are some of these are nits.
No,
but
no,
They could be
totally fine.
confusing to people. So 171.2 should say review of policy / philosophy and goals. And that's the same as 171.3. It's review of policy / community relations.
Right, so just to be clear for people who are watching, you're saying you're making corrections to the chart that's
Yes,
attached.
to the chart
not
on the
actual
agenda,
policy.
right?
Okay,
The-
can you
the
give me
policies are all-
numbers again
I
so
have
that
it.
I can go back through all this?
17.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Jennifer.
It's okay. I need all the numbers. 'cause
Okay,
I'm
I
just
can
getting
give
this
you my
on the spot.
notes.
Yeah.
I
That'd
can
be
give you my
great.
notes if that'll help.
That'd be great.
Just give me one second to get caught
The
up.
one that's numbered 5430 is actually 5420. And there's a typo on 5514, the word bicycles. That's it for the. The only other thing, and this can come later, Jennifer, is for new board members and people that are just kind of becoming familiar with how policies and procedures work. Many of these reference administrative guidelines that would be developed in accordance with the policies. And maybe we can have a discussion about what that looks like and where those reside. Like if somebody wanted to get more understanding of an administrative guideline related to a specific policy, I assume they would contact you to get that
Yeah.
information. But I was just curious because it's a lot of these then reference like,
Right.
procedurally, operationally, this is how we operationalize the policy.
Correct.
That's just a comment.
Any other comments? Thanks. Okay. Ashley, can you take the roll, please?
I will. First, I want to make it clear that we're voting or you're voting on 7.01 through what is now 7.14. So 6.03, what was 6.03 is now 7.13 and what was 6.04 is now 7.14. So you're voting on 7.01
Yeah,
through 7.
I should probably make a motion to remove,
14.
I'm going to remove 5830, the policy 5830 from agenda item 7.12. And we will circle back to that at the first reading at a different time.
5130.
5830.
Sorry.
Can I have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay.
I know I lost my list now.
Ashley, can you
Oh,
take
there
the
it is.
roll on that motion, please?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
hold
correct.
on. I
Thank
have to
you.
write down what it was.
It's 5830. It's the student fundraising policy.
To remove 50 from 7.12.
Everything else falls under the category of housekeeping, which is
Yeah.
either really items that can be addressed within the policy, or a lot of it was actually, this is our first time doing a first reading with the board, and this is a very comprehensive undertaking. And so some of it was about how it's actually appearing on the agenda as well. Ashley, can you go ahead and take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
And again, if you have a correction, an actual correction to a policy and not the chart that's attached to this document, if you could email and copy both of us on that so we can make sure that it makes it into the policy. And that'll of course be reflected in the attached document for people to see.
All right, I move to approve treasurer's recommendations 8.01.
We didn't, that was a
Oh, sorry.
motion
Okay,
and
all
a
right.
second to amend the
So now I
agenda.
move to
Now-
approve superintendent's recommendation 7.01 through 7.14. All
4, and Lori had already seconded that.
right, so we need the, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
All right, I move to approve treasurer's recommendations 8.01 through 8.04, please. Do I need a second?
You do need a second.
I do. need
I'll
a second.
Someone.
In many ways.
Okay. I'm just taking over. Item 8.02 is the 5-year forecast, which we went through pretty thoroughly. 8.03 is a donation of a train table worth $100 from Becky Quinn. And 8.04 is disposal of equipment. The list of items being disposed of is attached there. So I'm recommending your approval of these items.
Any questions or comments? Nope. Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yeah.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
Does anyone have any other business they would like to introduce this evening? All right, our next Board of Education meeting will be Wednesday, December 7th at 7 p.m. It will be a regular board meeting in the high school library. And I need a motion to go into executive session.
I would like to make a motion to enter into executive session in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22 for the sole purpose of the consideration of the following matter: compensation of a public employee or official, preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yeah.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
We will not take any action following executive session.